The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddhist truth one with myself. So that was quite a ceremony, wasn't it? It's full of wonderful and rich teaching. And I'd like to say just a few things about it that I have found helpful for myself. It's very easy when we have a ceremony like this, and it's quite elaborate, this one, with all kinds of bells and gongs and mudras and chanting. We can be very glad that we are offering this to the hungry ghosts. But some of us may wonder, what does this have to do with me? I'm going home, I have to go to work tomorrow, I'm going to school, or I'm taking care of aging parents, or maybe even tonight I'm going home to a difficult situation. What does this ceremony have to do with us and our daily life? And on top of that, all the things that are going on in the world that we can be concerned and worried about. So I'd like to talk about two aspects of this ceremony. The first one is the power of generosity. I really wanted to use that word power, and then I thought, well, that's kind of a funny word to use in conjunction. The word power in conjunction with generosity may seem a little bit unusual, but then as I thought, there are so many other manifestations of power being exemplified in the world today. None of them are all that terrific, and it's good to know what else is going on, what other kinds of positive forces are at work, and this incredible potential that we all have for change and conversion. So I think both of these things are very optimistic, very encouraging, very good to know, and to see how it is we can make use of both of these aspects of the teaching that are offered to us. So Sagaki is a memorial ceremony for all those who have died during the past year, and in particular for those who have died in past years in difficult or violent circumstances, unquiet states of mind, those who have been murdered or had tragic accidents or committed suicide, died in despairing states, and left what we call hungry ghost karma behind. And that is what we are trying to help and offer everything that we can in this ceremony. Hungry ghosts are not able to take in nourishment. They have not been able to take in the Dharma. They're so full of their own opinions and ideas, they don't have room for anything. And so it creates a state of constant craving, looking for something, spiritual malnutrition. Now, as you've heard us say before, we all have some of this hungry ghost karma. We can recognize it in ourselves. And so the teaching in this ceremony is to help us as well as all beings who suffer in this same way. The underlying difficulty, of course, is that hungry ghosts don't believe that they have Buddha nature. They can't believe that they already have what they need. And their sense of inadequacy and self-judgment causes them to believe that they're unworthy of the love of the eternal. So, I think we can all recognize perhaps some aspect of this in ourselves, however it might appear. This is one of the great compassion ceremonies when we show hungry ghosts how to take in the nourishment of the Dharma. And 2 times a year we do this ceremony at the time of the equinox, which is today, is one of those times. The equinox is considered to be a favorable time for change and conversion because everything is in balance. You know, it's like this. It's not like this. So you don't have to take a step up or a step down. You can just step right across. You make that step across, and the bridge is compassion. And this is a compassion that embraces everything. Inanimate beings, animate beings, it embraces all things. This is the basic teaching of Buddhism. Nothing is left out. Nothing. There is nothing that we can think of that is left out of the embrace of the eternal. So, everybody has Buddha nature, whether they know it or not, whether they like it or not, whether they think they want it or not. We all have Buddha nature, and there isn't anything that anybody can do about it. Even though people can spend a very long time trying to convince you in all the ways they can think of that they themselves have been left out. And there has somehow been an exception made for them. This brings to mind something that I read in a mystery a while back. There's this lovely interchange in which one of the characters goes to see a priest, this young woman, and she says, I want to confess this terrible thing that I've done. She says, but I've got a problem. And the priest says, what's your problem? And she says, well, I don't believe in God. And he says, well, that's no problem. He said, the problem would be if God didn't believe in you. So, Dogen has a somewhat different way of putting it. He says, although its light is extensive and great, the moon is reflected even in a puddle an inch across. So, what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about the ceremony that we just did and look at some of the specific teachings in it, in particular having to do with how we prepare the altar. For years I would come to this ceremony and I could not understand what it was about, no matter how hard I tried, and I listened to lectures and heard talks about it. And I never, ever could kind of, as we say, get a handle on it. But after I had been a novice here for a couple of years, I was asked to help prepare for the ceremony. And one of the things we did was prepare the food for the altar. And in doing that, I began to see the incredible compassion and love that is being expressed here. And I just want to share a little bit of this with you because you can see how beautiful the food is on the altar, but there are some specific things that we look into in preparing it, which are discussed in the notes in the lay liturgy book, which turns out actually to be a great source of information about ceremonies. It's all the things that are written, descriptions of the ceremony itself and what the chaplains do and what the preparation is and what the celebrant does and so on. But I would like to mention a few things. First of all, we had put some papers up for all of you to write down the names of people that you wanted particularly to be remembered at this ceremony. And those names were being read during the ceremony itself by the two monks who were reading beside the altar there. Now, all of the doors and windows ideally are left open so that there is no impediment for the ghost to come in. Okay? Wide open, screens off. We didn't do it this time. It's hard to get up there and take the screens off, but you can see what is being suggested here, that there is no impediment. There is no impediment to the hungry ghosts in coming to the eternal. And of course, this is true for ourselves as well. In the exhortations that we read to people who are dying or who have just died, we encourage them to let go of their judgments about themselves and to not turn away out of a sense of inadequacy and go straight to the arms of the eternal. Now, in preparing the Sagaki altar, this is what it tells us. There's a belief that if the hungry ghost altar is close to any altar upon which there is a statue of a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, the ghost cannot come near to take food. Their sense of inadequacy and fear is such that they feel they cannot approach, which is why this veil is over the big altar, and a special altar is made there, and it is far apart from any of the other shrines and altars in the room. And it says, all other altars should be left without undue decoration and lighting, as well as being as far as possible from the Hungry Ghost altar, as stated above. The Hungry Ghost altar should be given the utmost decoration and attention, as you can see, and it's got all those lovely banners of the dead hanging behind it, and all kinds of decoration and food on the altar. So there is, it's one of these kind of start where you are. If this is where the ghosts are, then what can we do to help them? And if this is where we are, we can start wherever we are. We can start wherever we are. And there is always the possibility for something to shift or change. So this is what it says about the different dishes that are put on the altar. Dishes of dried food, and everything is vegetarian. Dried foods of every kind should be prepared, as well as dishes of fruit, cooked vegetables, and liquids, varying from thick soups to juliennes. Hot and cold tea should also be prepared. Everything vegetarian found on, in, and above the earth should be represented. Now, the food is also offering the food of the Dharma. And because we are all so different, what can feed one of us may not necessarily nourish somebody else. And so there are all of these, a great deal of care goes into the variety of things put on the altar. And on the the main dish, which is on that little tree behind the altar there, that little kind of cake stand, has something that everybody would be able to enjoy. Reverend Master used to say that, in England it would be something like cream puffs, because that's what the British enjoy. Sometimes we've had donuts. Yeah? You see, the cultural differences are taken into account. In Asia, it would be something different. But the idea is something that everybody can enjoy. Then there are traditionally 3 small wooden tubs on short legs, one containing 3 piles of different dried foods, one of similar piles of wet foods, and one of mixed liquids. And the reason that these tubs are there with their short legs is that some ghosts may have mouths that are huge and can only slurp. And so something there for them. And traditionally, sometimes, although we didn't do it for this particular ceremony, but I'm going to mention it anyway, there is a stick holding the hands of the dead that is put in the tree that holds this special food, whatever has been decided to be offered, and that paper hands should be one of the 5 colors of the Buddha's halo: red, yellow, green, white, and purple. And these hands are needed because some ghosts may not have any hands. So a hand is offered, one of the Buddha's hands is offered to help. And these hands have to be different colors because some of the ghosts may be colorblind. But do you see how the effort is made to include everybody, no matter what their situation, no matter what they may consider as their handicaps and limitations? And it kind of brings up the question, how do we deal with our own sense of our own limitations? When we see the compassion and the love that is being offered here to these gakis who have these various kinds of disabilities we might think of, can that help us change what we see as our view of however we see our handicaps? So we have these banners behind the altar. They are the banners of the dead, reminding us that the Buddha appears in all the hells, appears in life, in death, everywhere. And those banners are a reminder. Those are the Buddhas of the dead. We did this musical. It's called a quats. I don't know what you would call it in English, but you heard it, didn't you? And that's with the bells and the drum and the gong and the cymbals, and that is to get the attention of the gakis. How often do we just kind of doze off and somebody has to say, "Wake up, wake up." So we are trying to get the attention of the gakis, inviting them to come and say, "There's something here for you. There is something here." And then the celebrant goes to the altar and asperges the altar with holy water, offering drink to the ghosts as well as assuring them of their cleanliness and their purity. And with the offer of incense, in the offering the smell of the lotus blossom to entice the ghosts to give up their delusions. and to see the purity of their own hearts. And then all the officers in the front row go up and do the same thing and come back and bow to the celebrant to say to the celebrant, in essence, yes, we agree with you, we support you. Let's offer this together, because the thought is that the Gakis need so much reassurance that as many of us as possible that can do the incense offering will help, and then everybody goes up and offers incense and is asked to assure the Gakis of their purity and invite them to give up their delusions. This is the help that's constantly being offered to us. And this generosity toward us, the compassion and the generosity of the Buddhas and ancestors that is constantly manifesting. And reminding us that there is no aspect of our karma that we need to turn away from. Nothing. Nothing that we need to turn away from. And the question really is, do we see this being offered to us, or do we turn away from it ourselves? When you think about it, how many times a day do we turn away from expressions of kindness that are offered us, of praise, of generosity, of help? How willing are we really to receive this goodness and generosity, or how often are we turning away from it? And so I think it's a good question for us to ask ourselves. We all have Buddha nature, and there's some part of us that doesn't want to know about it. That keeps insisting that, that we're an awful person, that nobody likes us, nobody wants to be around us. And I think if we can even get to the point where we can ask ourselves the question, what am I putting in the way of accepting my own Buddha nature? The windows and doors are wide open. There's no impediment. There's no obstacle. But we have these karmic habits that we have developed. And so this period of the equinox, in which there is equal darkness and light, is full of potential for conversion. We love conversion stories. I know a number of people have asked me if I know of any books that talk about conversion stories. I myself am immensely fond of conversion stories. I love them. And I think they remind us of our own potential. And they give us hope. And we can experience a massive conversion, or it can be just a little shift. Just a little shift. I had a little conversion yesterday. I had thought I was going to put aside some time yesterday afternoon to finish preparing for this talk, but then I realized I hadn't gone and looked on the board outside to see what I might have been asked to do for the ceremony today. So I went and looked, and I saw that I was part of this lovely musical Quats, and there was going to be a rehearsal, and it was going to be knowing me in Kwatzing, I knew it was going to take quite a while. And then I looked again and saw that I was also being on the assigned to help with preparing the altar food, which I dearly love to do. But then I got very worried because there wasn't going to be any time to work on my talk, and I thought, I don't have time to do this. And then I thought, wait a minute, I think I'm missing something. I think I missed the point here. And so I had just that little moment, of just, I could just feel myself getting all, kind of tight and worried and doing this. I don't have time, and the heart closes, And we have, I think, these experiences all the time. We have all these tiny conversions, moments that are filled with potential for conversion. And sometimes when we have some insight or something shifts, we can think, oh, gee, that was just a coincidence. We can think, gee, I've been trying to understand something for years, and all of a sudden I got it. Well, maybe it had to do with what I ate for breakfast. But actually, this is the fruit of our training. This is the groundwork that we have been doing. And it relates to this matter of darkness and light, which I'm going to just say something about here, because in the equinox, dark and light are in balance. So in the Sando Kai, which is one of our scriptures, we say, within all light is darkness, but explained it cannot be by darkness that one-sided is alone. In darkness there is light, but here again, by light one-sided, it is not explained. Light goes with darkness as the sequence does of steps in walking. All things herein have inherent great potentiality. Both function, rest, reside within. And Reverend Master Jiu's comment on this is, because this line is so important, the gong is struck. It is actually light and darkness within each step. It's not one step after another, if you think about it. We say the sequence of steps in walking, but if it was only one step, your other foot would be up in the air, wouldn't it? So the light and darkness, as a monk pointed out to me, it's a sequence. It's all one movement, and they go together. No matter how dark the karma within you may seem, no matter how light, know that the essence of both is in fact identical. Thus there is the great potentiality for the end and the beginning to come together at the source, and for function and rest to reside within. There's something about that inherent great potentiality. Everything is full of potential. Everything has within it the possibility of change, and because of impermanence, it is happening all the time. And often we don't see it, or we don't want to see it, or it can be very subtle. And some of us would like it to be light all the time. We're fearful of the darkness and we'd rather have light. But perhaps we haven't seen the potential in the darkness. the mindful recitation at the shrine of the guardian deity, which we do every year, has this lovely opening sentence. Transforming work progresses on unseen. Passing time cycles round again. There is all this work that is always going on unseen. Plants flourish in the dark. The baby is nourished in the darkness of the womb. A tiny bud springs up in the spring. You know, nothing comes forth full-blown. There is this work that is done in the dark. And we often worry about how we're doing in our practice, but we can't keep pulling up the carrot to have a look at its roots, you know? So there is this rootedness that is taking place in the darkness. And there's a part of us that can really sense that. You know, we have to trust it, I would say. Yeah, we have to trust the darkness. Our minds don't need to be in on everything. We don't have to always know or understand what is going on. We can trust the unseen good. And sometimes, you know, we can see that there has been a shift in our training or our perceptions. Maybe we're able to stand back a little bit from something that previously was very troublesome to us. Maybe we're able to be a little kinder in a situation where we might not have been so before. Maybe we're able to resolve a very difficult situation with someone that has led to an increase in trust and an ability to have more harmony in that relationship in the future. So Reverend Master Jiu taught us a very powerful conversion mantra when she came back from Japan. Now, some of you have heard me say this before, but I think it's very apt here. And that is, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. You can try this at home. It's safe. But it is just amazing what happens when we can really open our hearts and say that. So I would like to end with goodness, here if I can find it. Yeah. I'd like to end with this story that Karen Sondheim tells about herself in an anthology called The Hidden Lamp. And this is part of the offering that she made in that collection. She says, when I was 20, I left college in search of wisdom. So the alarm bells are going off right there, right? For those of us who spent years doing that and didn't quite know where to look for it. But she says, I set off in travel around the world with a small pack on my back and my thumb for transportation. After many months, I made my way to Fez in Morocco. Later, I went to live with the Berbers in the Atlas Mountains. 4 hours by bus along a winding road from Marrakesh. $1 a night bought a hut under a starry sky, a night in a hut. The terraced hillsides were lit only by a single candle carried by a barefoot shepherd. While living in this cluster of baked earth houses, I traded my fine hiking boots for some embroidered slippers, the local footgear. It was hard to walk far in them, but I imagined I had sacrificed my greed. After about a month, it was time to leave this small village, and I waited several hours with local people in the frosty early morning for the bus. Buses had no defined schedule, and waiting was an accepted life activity. An old man with deep creases in his face and a torn robe was muttering to himself and mingling with the crowd of men, women, children, sheep, and chickens. He demanded money from me and angrily rebuked me as I continued to refuse him. I'd been in Morocco long enough to observe that most people gave money to beggars, but I was determined to make my small savings last for years. Didn't the acquisition of wisdom take a lifetime? I battled my shame by telling myself that my tightly held coin served a higher purpose. At last the beggar turned away. As I complained to myself about the cold, all the more bitter without my insulated boots, I noticed that the old man was making a small fire with sticks and heating water in a turquoise teapot. He was making the most popular local drink, sweet mint tea. I smiled to myself and entered a reverie. Wasn't it wonderful that at least he had the means to make tea and enjoy a most integral national pastime? But then I felt the cold wind bite my neck. I longed for my warm boots. A gravelly voice interrupted my thoughts, and I saw the beggar standing in front of me. He was holding a glass of steaming tea and moving it toward my hand. I had not only counted my change, but measured my time, believing that the more time I spent wandering the world, the more wisdom I would attain. These measurements in my own mind were overturned in less than a second, as a stranger I had stubbornly rebuffed gave me the gift I needed most. He gave me sweet tea on a cold morning, the only possession he had. And as he did so, he showed me the impermanent nature of myself, as resentment dissolved into kindness. Generosity is immeasurable. Homage to all the Buddhas in all worlds. Homage to all the Bodhisattvas in all worlds. Homage to the scripture of great wisdom.